I treat each individual bed as its own garden. So for like right here in this section, I have 5 4x8 beds. Well, in my mind, that's 5 different gardens. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're having a good day. It's a beautiful day here and we're getting ready for spring. So I've done a lot of talking about what's going on in my garden, but I want to talk about how I get ready for spring in my garden and then the other things around my yard, like fruit trees and bushes and stuff like that, and just kind of give you a general idea of like what it takes to kind of get things growing in the right direction in early spring. So, and I'm not gonna lie, there's been some things that I've been kind of curious are even gonna make it because they started flowering super early. So we'll see how that goes, but we'll start in the garden briefly because I've done a lot of videos about that, and then we'll start working our way around. One thing I have done is I came in and I put the shade cloth on top of the greenhouse, and I haven't actually buckled it down at all, so you can see it's kind of blown off, but luckily there's some screws sticking out top so it holds it in place. But this has really lowered it, and I did put it on the outside this year. And so I put it on the outside because the thought process was if it's black and it's inside, then it's going to absorb heat and then continue to release heat inside before it has to get out. So this way I'm just avoiding that whole situation completely. It'll absorb the heat and then it'll let it out while it's outside, but block some of the sun from coming in. So that should help keep it a little bit cooler as well. At least that's the thought process, and we're gonna leave it there. I think from now on, we're just gonna do it this way because it's a lot easier to put it up there. But not much to say about the greenhouse. It's just planting and taking care of at this point. So nothing major. It's still treating for the aphids every 2 to 3 days, and they are getting under control. But we also, for the rest of our gardens, like here, and then all of these, we topped all of these off. So at some point you definitely need to top those off, and we're seeding and planting and stuff like that. And now is really the best time to do it. And also applying a quick fertilizer to a pre-fertilizer so it can start to break down into the soil. So the onions are coming along. Everything here is going good. The only thing that we really need to top off here is this little bed here. And we are just going to use some bagged soil for that. And so we'll add the soil in there in the coming, well, maybe this afternoon to be exact, and just kind of take care of that. So that shouldn't be an issue. But once you get everything topped off, then you can really get going and just start planting. That's the biggest thing, is just getting everything prepared. You know, there's a lot of preparation that happens in spring. I mean, if you look behind me here, here's the plastic for the bed. We're drying it out so we can roll it up. We don't want, and I keep leaving it out and it gets due the next day. So this way, this will just kind of burn all the dew off and we won't collect mold or mildew over the spring or over the summer. And then we have the hose left over from our in-ground watering project we did, where we're letting it loosen up now, and then we're actually going to replace the hose that's running in the woods here with that, and then we can reuse the hoses in other portions. So that's one thing. But other than planting and topping off and applying free fertilizer and stuff like that, that's what we've been doing with our beds thus far. We talk about our fruit trees a little bit. Here's the peach tree I planted in the fall, and I came out and I trimmed it back a little bit initially. And so it's starting to bud. And what I did is I trimmed off any branch that will get shaded by another branch. So if you look at this one here, you see how there's 2 buds here, 2 buds here, 1 bud, 1 bud, 2 buds, 1 bud. Everywhere where there's 1 bud will actually be a peach. So we can kind of estimate there. So we didn't want a peach at the end of our limb because that would just put excess weight on it. So we wanted to trim it so there's just leaves here. And then over the year, this will kind of branch out again, and then we can come back and re-trim this as possible too. And so the goal with this one actually is we're going to trim it next year down to here, hopefully. And then we'll have a nice low tree that will branch out like this so we can stand up, and we don't need a ladder or anything to harvest from. And so like we are going to lose this branch this year. I can tell you that now because there's 2 peach buds here. So, I mean, they're thriving right now. So as soon as they turn peaches, we're going to lose this branch. And we actually may end up losing this whole branch. So that's something that we've been doing to prepare. And we have another peach tree in our front yard, which we've done the same thing to. It's a year older. so we could do a little bit more trimming onto the peach tree. As far as our little container garden that we're building out, we still need to get a couple more pots, and then we need to get soil for them. So we're going to be working on that as well. We're going to buy bulk soil for these because it's just cheaper and easier to fill. So we'll be adding that in as well, but that's just something that we've kind of been building up on. And the goal is to get most of them filled. If we don't get them filled this year, I'm not going to stress about it, but it is something that we want to move forward on. So we're just kind of adding to that. We have plenty of time. Like if I don't do a spring garden in it, whatever, you know, I'm mostly doing it for like a big tomato or something like that. And then as long as we still have 2 months to get that ready, so the pressure is not there for that as much. And we've also been working on our blueberry bushes. So believe it or not, there is a way to trim blueberry bushes to keep them more productive longer. And I'll show you, I've trimmed them all, but I guarantee you I missed something. You can see these are pretty much loaded with flowers. So everywhere you see a flower, there's gonna be a blueberry. So we're gonna get a couple clusters of blueberries. Now I was a little worried about this because, I mean, honestly, it started budding out in January. So I was like, I don't really know what's going on. It seemed a little early, but we just kind of let it roll. And this is our 5th, 6th year with it. And you can see the bees just, they wear it out, you know, all spring. It's like their first big foray into the world of pollination. But if we come down here and you see this limb here, see how there's just nothing really growing on it? I mean, we have like one leaf. So we'll come in, and it's a little late, but we're gonna go ahead and cut that off. And so we did that across the board, but like I told you, we probably missed something, which sure, in fact, we did. And so we'll come around and we'll double check all of these blueberries here. We have like 7 blueberry bushes here, and just kind of trim back all of those old limbs that aren't growing anymore. Which I know seems kind of crazy on the outside, but if you think about it, and you have an old limb that's not producing flowers, it's got a couple of leaves on it, that plant is shooting the energy up to those limbs, and then it's trying to grow those limbs. Well, we don't want that energy to go there. We want that energy to go to the other parts of the blueberry bush, and we want it to go to the actual fruits and the leaves and stuff like that. So we go ahead and cut that off. And when the roots try to send the energy up to it, it's going to stop and say, oh, no, we got to go somewhere else. And then it's going to push new growth. It'll cause branching and stuff like that. And then build that hedge that we're kind of loosely looking for. We're not looking for a tight hedge, but just something that kind of breaks up this section. And it's been a long process. But as you guys know, nothing in gardening is fast. Absolutely nothing. So here's a plum tree we put in this year. And we did the same type of treatment where we just cut off the little branches that were coming out and kind of cleared it up a little bit, making sure that all the branches are alternating all the way around so that they're not getting shaded. And we'll see how this one goes. I'm still kind of learning about plums. I'm super excited. It's my favorite fruit. So we'll see how it goes. But again, this year we'll probably end up cutting this back to here all the way across and just really condensing this tree as much as possible. Because last thing we wanted to do is shoot all the way up into this tree. And then you got to get a ladder to get out there and all that stuff. And that's not really going to work for me. Fruit trees and blueberry bushes and stuff have been a big push for us recently to kind of have like a permaculture type situation going on, where we're going to get a variety of fruits throughout the year, you know, and they all come at once, and that's okay. But we know that we're going to get these fruits to enjoy, and we don't ever have to plant them. We just have to maintain them. So once you get it done and you start working on it, then it gets easier and easier as it goes on. So I have this really big lemongrass bush here, and every year it's crazy. So I cut it back every year. You can see it down here, and it gets to be about this tall. And so early spring, I'll come back and I cut it, and then I compost all that, because we're coming up into the time frame of the year where it's going to be hard to get those brown materials for our compost. So we cut that back, and then we just start adding that into our compost. And that'll be like, it's not the last flush, but like one of the last big flushes of like browns for our compost pile. So we take advantage of that, but it's crazy. Cut this back yesterday, and you can see that it's already starting to grow back. It was growing back when I cut it. So we do this every year. We just cut it back, and then it just shoots up as soon as it starts to get warm. Then you start getting more and more and more. So we do a little bit of herbs around here. We do some rosemary in the back corner. We do some lavenders and stuff like that. And so like this lavender that I'm going to show you now, last year was this big. That's it, as big as my face. It was like 2 sprigs. I mean, now look at it. So it's definitely grown, but because it's starting to lay over, we will again cut this pretty much even, and then it'll be able to stand up and it will bush out more and we'll get a bigger bush of it. And so that's what we really want to do, because we need to come out here and do a little bit of weeding, clearly. I mean, weeding is my least favorite thing to do. Luckily, my wife is really good at it and kind of enjoys it. So we'll come out here and do that, but just getting all of these bushes ready to go so that when they're ready to grow, which is gonna be any day now, then they can kind of just get started and just boom, start growing immediately. Because the beginning of it starts now, and then I let it grow for most of the season without really trimming it until about fall. And then I might give it a trim back in some sections and just kind of see how it goes. Because in my mind, it works like from fall to winter is trimming season of any point. But when it starts to get real cold, you don't want to have a lot of fresh wounds, because then the cold can get inside of the plant and then cause dieback and stuff like that. So we really don't want any of that to be an issue at all. So at this point, we've had about roughly a week and a half to 2 weeks of like well above freezing, very warm days, and the garden is showing exponential growth. So we know from experience that once it starts to get warm like this, it doesn't take long for the garden to kind of get out of control. So we got to stay on top of it. We're going to be trimming a lot. We're going to be harvesting of the greens a lot. A lot of the stuff that we've planted are really starting to grow faster. The onions that I put in, they were basically dormant for about 2 weeks. And it seems to me now that I'm looking at them, I'll show you a couple of the onions that have really taken off. And you can see like this is starting to really thicken up at this point. And that just tells me now that the roots are getting nice and comfortable in the ground and it's ready to start pushing green growth. So that means that I need to start fertilizing more and more. So all of this turns into the big onion bed that I hope and dream for. Also taking this time to evaluate stuff that sat in the garden for the winter, stuff that may not be growing, that could be stunted. You know, as things need to come out, we look at it and we have a realistic look at it and we say, hey, this cabbage did not do well through the freeze. It survived, it looks fine, but at this point, it's not growing at all. So we're gonna take this opportunity to get that out of there and get stuff into it. And that's really the biggest thing about keeping a smaller garden productive. I mean, I don't have a small garden, but I don't have a giant garden. So I need to kind of stay on top of it. I treat each individual bed as its own garden. So for like right here in this section, I have 5 4x8 beds. Well, in my mind, that's 5 different gardens. So I need to keep those productive in their own right. And by taking those sick plants or those stunted plants that just are not growing at all, the fact of the matter is, if they haven't started pushing at this point and really start growing, or like some of the cabbages aren't forming heads, guess what? They're not going to do it. So don't sit there and hope and pray. I say get up, pull them out, and put something in its place when you got something ready. And that's the biggest thing. So we just try to take this time to evaluate everything and then move into the right direction for it. And that's really the biggest key to all of this, is for the whole shebang here, from the fruit trees to the bushes to the garden, it's evaluating each plant, trimming, removing, planting, fertilizing, and revitalizing the beds. And that's how we're going to try and have a successful spring garden this year. Goodbye.